Every year, Americans spend billions on self-help, self-improvement, and transformation. But is it working? Welcome to the Transformation Truth Podcast, your home for a slightly irreverent and sometimes informed look at what it takes to change, why you don't have it, and what it will take to get it.
Best comedies of all time.
Best comedies of all time. That's what we're going to talk about today. Well, howdy and welcome to the Transformation Truth Podcast. I'm your host, Darren Hibbs, and I have with me here Abel Villarreal.
Yellow.
And we have just been talking about the Three Amigos.
Three Amigos is definitely top 5 comedies of all time. And that's just because
Great comedy or the greatest comedy?
I don't know. I'm reluctant to say it's the greatest just because I'm afraid there's something else out there that I'm missing. But for the intent of this conversation, we could just say it's the greatest.
What's your top 5?
Well, geez. See, and this probably just speaks more to my level of immaturity than it does anything else. I mean, Dumb and Dumber will forever be just one of the classic ones. But The Jerk is still a classic movie, and I guess we got to just put Steve Martin.
Steve Martin's there.
Yeah, so we got to put Steve Martin up there. So, Three Amigos is great, man. I can't think of a lot of movies off the top of my head right now, but Three Amigos definitely is one that's just unforgettable, like, stuck in my head.
It is. And
I can't believe that my parents would let me watch it.
My parents didn't let me watch it. I don't think I saw it until I was in college. I'm like, I missed so much.
My parents would pretty much say, hey, because it was probably rated PG. I don't even know there was a PG-13
I think it might be PG.
Yeah, because there was no PG-13.
Well, that's probably true.
It may have been PG-13.
That's probably true.
If it had come out today.
The Jerk is one that I wouldn't recommend watching unless you watch it on TV.
Which is funny because it's
pretty rough.
It's rated R, but I think that if it came out today, it'd be PG-13. Because I've seen some pretty rough PG-13 movies.
Well, that's true. I don't know. I don't think they would make it today. There's too many racist. I mean, it was like they pushed the whole, racial and racist, things in that movie. It's kind of like Disney won't play the Song of the South anymore. They will not play it.
Happy Gilmore is
That's up there.
It's up there. And I was thinking about that as you said, about the I don't know if the racist remarks necessarily will keep a movie from being released now, because I'm thinking of Happy Gilmore on the scene when Chubbs says that he didn't make it in the PGA and puts his hand on his shoulder and says, I'm sorry because you're black. Hell no.
Yeah.
It's because I lost my hand to that alligator.
Yeah, I think
it's just fun. But I liked that joke because it actually makes fun of that idea of racism still being like, just the number one factor in our minds. And I don't think that it is, but it's funny how quick it's just. We still push that envelope so much now. But I think we have room to do that now.
Yeah.
As a culture, but you still don't want to go too far.
Yeah, you definitely don't want to go too far. It's kind of funny is the further along we get away from Jim Crow and things like that, it seems like there's a growing angst, with racial tensions. There's just. It won't die, and it's very interesting to me because in the United States, we are less, we're not as far removed from slavery and things like that than they are in say, the UK. Mm-hmm. Where in the UK, racism is scarcely talked about ever. Like, it's just not an issue.
Is it because they're not racist?
I'm sure there's racists. I think probably more of the issue they have right now is probably racism against immigrants, mainly Arabic immigrants, and because they're completely inundated with them, and so there's some issues there. But as far as black folk and white folk in the UK, there's very little racism. I've had British person after British person tell me that, and it's because they've got an extra 100 years without slavery ahead of us.
I think that that may have something to do with it, but here in America. I think, as well as abroad, we're moving away, excuse me, from racism as an issue, and more towards religion as the issue. And so I don't think people have a problem with those who are from the Middle East, I think they have a problem with the idea that because they're from the Middle East, they must be Muslim and
They're jihadists.
They're jihadists, and that's the enemy. And so then I'm going to look at you with a different eye than I would anybody else.
Yeah.
I think that religion, but it goes the other way too, because there's oppression obviously all over the world against Christians, and so it's back and forth. It's back and forth. But I think that the main issue today is religionism. I don't know. What would you call that? What is it? I'm missing something.
Religiosity.
Religiosity?
Let's come up with let's find every word we can for that kind of stuff.
Yeah, let's document it. We'll use it, and then we can say we came up with it.
Trademark
it.
Religiosityism.
Yes.
Religiosity.
Anti-religion.
Anti-establishmentarian religionism.
There you go. We just extended the word.
Darn right.
Good for us.
We are making up words. You are witnessing history in the making right here on this podcast.
I don't know if you came here for that, but we're more than willing.
We are definitely more than willing.
Add to your vocabulary every day.
We will do it for you.
Come and grow with us.
That is that's what we're here to offer. So, with all of that, let's just make the worst transition possible into what we want to talk about today. And is, do we hurt ourselves when we try to change? When we try to change ourselves, it seems like more often than not, people end up doing more damage.
Yeah, I've hurt myself just changing my pants.
It's very true.
So it's very possible.
When we expend effort to lose weight or to better ourselves in the workplace, how often, sometimes it works, but how often is it that we actually end up going backwards? How many weight loss programs? I've known a number of people that they lose a little bit of weight on a weight loss program, and they end the weight loss program, and they actually gain more weight after it than they had on before.
See, I thought you were talking about like people who don't stretch before they exercise, because you could definitely hurt yourself doing that too.
Well, that's definitely possible.
But I hear your point. Yes, there are. So people will jump into these different regimens, different diets, different exercise routines, and see negative transformation, and then just be completely, done with that whole thing, and they have a bad experience, and then, they'll start thinking this just isn't going to work for me, and so then it becomes a personalized issue. It becomes about who they are more deeply than just their appearance.
Yeah,
and so, absolutely. I think people are going. Yeah.
There you go. That's all we have.
Have
for
you
today.
ever? No. It was right there. It was right there, and then I lost it. So
that never happens to me.
Never happens to you.
Never happens to me.
I see. I hurt myself when I try to transform.
Well, the thing that I was thinking about for this is something that Paul says in 1 Corinthians 4:3-4, and he says, "I carry very little if I am judged by you or by any human court. Indeed, I do not even judge myself. My conscience is clear, but that does not make me innocent. It is the Lord who judges me." And I think one of the things that we kind of miss when we're trying to go through transformation, when we're trying to change ourselves, and again, this goes back to the premise for this podcast, is so much money and time and effort is spent in the United States every year on transformation. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry. Somewhere between 10 to 20, maybe even more, $1 billion per year is spent on self-help and transformation. And I think this right here is one of the keys to it. Is really transformation is all about self-judgment. It's all about looking at ourselves in the mirror and saying, I don't like something about what I'm seeing.
Right.
And here Paul, as a believer, as a Christian, Paul says that he doesn't even judge himself.
Yeah, I think one of the main issues really with people who want to transform is that all of the self-help that's out there right now is really, I feel like it's preying on them.
I would agree with that.
Because every human being wants to change.
But not us.
Not us. We are the only ones who are not subject to that.
We are really here to help you.
Yes. We have the answers. Not us. No, because what we're trying to do here is to show and to expose that idea that you cannot change yourself. And so I think it's interesting that another shift in our culture that we've seen here recently are TV shows that present the main character as imperfect. Not that that's anything new, and I think of like, Ugly Betty, My Big Fat Life that's on one of the TLC or something right now. But it's a girl who's overweight and she knows it and she doesn't care and she's living her life anyway.
Yeah.
And I think that those types of shows are really giving more of a positive look at the idea that, guess what, you're not perfect and that's okay. I think that might be a step in the right direction, but I think it's pointing to something that's greater, but it's a matter of where we land on that. And so there's a security that can be found in our imperfection. I think that ultimately we still regress to humanism, like me just trying to think the best of myself, positive thoughts, who I am. I think that will still fall short ultimately.
Yeah.
But it still points to the need to the idea of there needing to be a greater anchor in life where we can find security and confidence in who we are.
Yeah, I agree. I think a lot in our culture, like you're saying, there's a move toward, hey, we're all broken and messed up, and there's really nothing you can do about it. So just be okay with yourself.
Right.
Learn to love who you are.
Right.
And that is in some ways a step in the right direction, but it's also in other ways completely untrue.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's interesting. Like here, I don't know. It must be because of what we're talking about, because we're right on top of everything that's happening in our culture.
We are.
But I've had a lot of conversations, feels like, lately, of Christian people coming to me and saying they're working through their issues, they're working through their problems. But you know what? I know that I need to love myself first. I know that before I can forgive anyone else, I need to forgive myself. And it's almost like it's like they're almost there. They're almost realizing the truth. They're kind of getting there, but they're stopping at themselves. And I think that can get you in just as much trouble as having never came to that place and that position. But if it's the last stop on your way to saying, I can't help myself, I can't do anything for myself, and then looking outward and looking to the possibility of help coming from somewhere else, I think that it's a necessary stop, and it'll definitely be useful.
I think it's interesting that, one of the primary tenets of the original 12-step program was that you can't do this, and now it's a higher power is the word, but originally it was you cannot do this without God. You cannot change without God, and that was aimed at people who had come to a place of such brokenness and a place where they realized they had no ability to change themselves. They've tried every single thing. Right. And most people don't ever come to that level of brokenness. There's always one more thing that they can try. Mm-hmm. But the truth is the truth for people broken and addicted to crack cocaine or alcohol. And it's the same truth for someone who's attended church their entire life and never done anything wrong. The truth is the same for everyone, is you can't really change yourself.
Right.
You can change the stuff on the outside, you can change the way you look, you can change your behaviors.
Right.
But you can't actually change what's on the inside without something else acting on you.
Yeah, it was Albert Einstein who said that the same mind that created a problem cannot be the same mind who fixes the problem, resolves the problem.
He also said that if you knew what the person sitting next to you was thinking, you'd move.
He says a lot of really good stuff.
Go ahead.
It's like he's a genius.
I mean, it was like he's an Einstein, for crying out loud.
Is that a coincidence he has that name? That's amazing.
I think they gave him that name after the fact.
Did they? You should really be an Einstein. No, it's just interesting, and I don't know whether or not we've mentioned this on this podcast, but I work with men who are struggling with drug and alcohol addiction. That's what I do. I watch men come to us addicted to all kinds of things, and I get phone calls from men who are addicted to all sorts of things, and I get phone calls for women who are addicted to all sorts of things, and it's interesting that one of the things I've learned over the last few years of working with this ministry is that every human being is born an addict. We're all addicted, okay? And I don't mean it the same way that psychologists mean it.
Yeah.
They say, oh, you were born an alcoholic because your parents were alcoholics. And I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that we're all addicted to something. And what I believe that we're all addicted to ultimately is we're addicted to ourselves. We're addicted to ourselves. That's why.
I feel like it's a pretty good addiction for me.
Yeah. If I'm going to be addicted to something, no, trust me, I'd rather be addicted to me than you. So,
For those of you that are still listening to us, thank you for hanging in there.
yeah, we're going to get somewhere here with this. I promise. No, we're all over it, man. This idea that self-help is telling you to look to yourself is just adding to the issue of yourself. You are the problem. You are your biggest problem. Every person is born selfish. Every person is out for what's good for them. And all it does is perpetuate the issue of our own brokenness, because when at the end of the day, our lives need to carry the weight of all the things that our lives should amount to, and then we realize we can't, and then we shatter underneath the weight of all of that. I mean, we should be coming to the conclusion, maybe this isn't up to me. And so it's just interesting that the world keeps perpetuating, no. Dig deeper, work harder.
Yeah.
You're going to figure this thing out, It's like, man, I've done everything I can. I'm completely shattered and broken. And so I think that's what the Apostle Paul is talking about in 1 Corinthians. He's talking about his having come to a position, into a place where he no longer worries about for himself. He no longer worries what other people think about him, because ultimately his identity is not found in himself, but he has found an identity that's greater, that's stronger, that can carry much more weight than he ever could, and that's his identity in Christ.
And I think what it comes down to, when it is time to change, and you actually want personal transformation, is it comes down to this issue of having the correct foundation laid. And Abel was kidding with me before we started the show that I must have been watching the Lego movie, because I've got all these words interspersed here on our notes, master builder and things like that. But there's no coincidence that Jesus is called the master builder, that he uses these metaphors when he's speaking about having that foundation laid, having that firm foundation. And a lot of times the self-help and the things that we try to do for personal transformation, they're putting a roof up where there's no foundation or walls or structure.
Right.
We're building a roof on the ground. It does us no good. Or we're building it on some kind of shaky structure that's going to collapse.
Yeah.
And really, we can't actually begin to focus on self-transformation, on self-help, on changing ourselves until we have that appropriate foundation, until we have something to build on. Mm-hmm. And that really is going back to allowing Jesus to be, the most fundamental change in our lives.
Yeah, so that's a great analogy with the roof. One that I've used in the past is that we often come to our dilapidated lives with a bucket of spackle and a bucket of paint, and then we just pretend like this house that should be condemned and crushed to the ground, that no, it just needs a little bit of wall work, needs a little bit of fresh paint, and I'll be okay.
Yeah.
And that's not going to fix the issue of the structural damage that's happened in our lives, the things that just continue to rot us from the inside, that those things need to be dealt with. And that's exactly what the gospel presents, is this idea that you don't need a fresh coat of paint. What you need is to be completely crushed to the ground, starting with a new foundation, and then being built up in newness, being built up brand new. And that's why I appreciated the show Extreme Home Makeover with the guy with the soul patch.
Yeah. Yeah, he was rocking the soul patch. That's all
rocking.
I can remember.
I'm almost certain.
All I saw on that show is just the soul patch.
Just a soul patch. He was like a floating soul patch. I think that he'll probably...
I would say, move that bus, and I would see a soul patch. That's all I saw.
Just a house with a big soul patch right in the front. Yeah, but I loved that show because what they would do is they'd come to this situation with this dilapidated house, this broken down house, and it wasn't a matter of saying, hey, we want to fix your house for you, but it was, hey, we want to crush your house. We want to remove your house. We even want to remove the foundation and build you an entirely brand new house. But one of the aspects of that show that I thought was neat was when he brings his like interior design people and stuff in there, and they walk the house first, and they want to know what are the pieces in this house that really mean something to this family. Like what are the little tiny things that really point to who they are individually? Because we can build them a big beautiful house, but it won't be their home unless they can really identify with this thing in terms of their experiences, their past, who they are uniquely. And so they would get those little pieces, those little items, and then they'd work them into the house somehow.
Yeah.
And so then so when they came into the house, it was like, wow, this is brand new. This is more than I could have ever created for myself or done for myself. And then there's these little unique pieces that remind me of that this is my home. This is where I get to live. This is for my benefit. That reminds me of Galatians 2:20. You know, when Paul says he writes there to the church in Galatia and says, "For I no longer live, nevertheless it's I, but not I." Okay, so he's kind of jumbling up his speech a little bit.
Before you finish that, for anyone who can show us on a map where Galatia is, we'll send you an autographed copy of our show notes for today.
Yeah. Was that right? Is it Galatia?
Galatia, yes.
Okay.
If you can show us where Galatia is on a map, then we'll give you autographed show notes. They will be worth something, very shortly.
And a Galatia is not that piece of ice that moves through the ocean really slowly. That's not a Galatia.
Well, see, now you're just helping them. Now you're getting that.
That's not a Galatia.
And the most creative answer we'll give one of the show notes.
That might work. If you can just throw us a picture of a glacier, we might count it for credit towards you. So Paul is saying, my house is built brand new. But I have not forgotten. I'm still here. Paul is still here. Okay, yeah. Paul's in the house. Like there's something that makes this uniquely for me. My life has changed, but it's still me. So the identity of who he is as an individual is still there, but the structure of his life is all Christ. And that's when he realizes, like, the vast majority of this thing is Jesus. The way that I've experienced the most transformation and change in my life is by giving myself over to an entirely different life. But I'm still in it. It's still me.
You're still Abel.
Yeah.
You're still the Abel that you were when you were 3 months old and your parents were looking at you. Said, that's not me. That must be you. And your mom said, that's not me. That must, we're created. If you've got kids, you've seen this in your children. Yeah. Is you can recognize right away that child is them. It's they're 100% them. You see it so clearly, so very early. Yeah. Is that God has made each one of us very individual, and that's one of the ways where kind of the self-help world can fall down is because the mantra is, hey, it worked for me, it can work for you. And it's all about do what I did to achieve the success that I had. And then there's always the little disclaimer at the very bottom that you need to be, have 4-year-old eyes to read is, these results are not typical. Yeah. Isn't it interesting is the mantra is always do what I did and you can have the success that I have. Results not typical.
Results not typical. Yeah, the odds are you're not going to experience this, but I'd sure like for you to buy my book or my video and see if you could try.
When we lay that foundation in Jesus, when we have that foundation in Christ, He is the one who created us individual in the first place. He's the one that can help rebuild. We may have built this shoddy ramshackle of a life because we've built it on other people's foundations, other people's ideas. He's the one that can come over and knock it all down for us, lay the proper foundation, and then start building in those things that are uniquely us. The things, and those are the kinds of things you can't get. And I'm not saying that all self-help books are bad, because there can be good little nuggets of information in there. But if you're building on those self-help books, you've probably got the wrong foundation to begin with.
Yeah, I've read some self-help books that I was convinced that the writer must have known something about the gospel because they kind of wrote it in there. It was a little off, but I've walked away reading some of those books and saying that's a good illustration for a greater point than the one this person's trying to make. But I think that listen, I think every self-help book is a good one, because if at the end of it results are not typical and you find yourself broken again, then it's going to cause you to go reaching out once again. But obviously what you and I believe is that road can end at Jesus, that you can see that He's everything that you need for transformation and change. And the results are typical with Jesus. They're guaranteed if you'll trust Him and allow Him to be your life and just live life for you, that He'll even take those those moments in your life that you capture and you see and need to change, and he'll just remind you again, like, don't worry, I've got this. I'm going to change this. I'm going to transform this. Just trust me with it. And then our job just becomes allowing him to, which is just a beautiful component of the gospel. The Apostle Paul uses that language a lot. Let, allow, yield. It's so cool. That's our part. Our part is just letting it happen instead of trying to make it happen. That's the difference.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that people are looking for when they're looking for change and self-transformation and things like that is they're looking for actionable steps, and a lot of times they'll cling on to actionable steps that again are on the wrong foundation. They're built on the wrong premises, and so I think I want to try and each one of these podcasts kind of finish with an actionable step that builds on the proper foundation. And I think one of the things that's probably least comfortable for people when they're going down this road is actually asking God's opinion about things. We ask everyone else's opinion first before God's. Normally, it's only when we're broken enough to ask God for his opinion and his help. That's when we do it.
But how do we do that, Darren?
Well, Abel, I'll tell you how we do that. We actually, spend time in prayer. And that is something that's difficult for Americans because we've got such fast-paced lifestyles. But just take a minute, take 5 minutes, take 10 minutes, start building it into your life. Actually put it on your schedule. Yeah. You are meeting with the eternal creator of heaven and earth. Put it on your schedule for 15 minutes a day. Start there and move up.
I've recently, I just sent my son, my 12-year-old son, Aiden, a calendar invite so that I would meet with him once a week for an hour to sit and talk with him.
That's really cool.
And so he was really excited about that. We've been doing that over the past couple of weeks, but I actually forgot.
You don't have internet at your house, so how does that work? When you say calendar invite, did you put it on a whiteboard?
No. No, we did it while we were in town. We had LTE there in town. And I won't go into that because I'm very upset with AT&T
If the apocalypse happens next week, you want to be where Abel is because no one will, or if China invades and starts killing her, no one will ever find him.
I'm off the grid, man.
AT&T, internet companies can't find him.
It is kind of hard to be mad. I'm kind of upset with AT&T because they keep putting all I can do is watch the commercials that claim how awesome their LTE signal is, and in the meantime, my phone tells me you have an LTE signal, but then nothing actually works. It's like, okay, they did a great job of making sure your phone says you have an LTE signal, but actually not having one. So that's their little scheme. Anyway, so me and Aiden are being very just intentional about spending that time together. So that's what I think about when you talk about being intentional with God. That's what prayer is. Prayer is not just something you do exclusively. That Christians don't do it exclusively before eating meals. It's more than that. It's not just something you do on Sundays at church. It's not just something you do when somebody is sick. It's not just something you do whenever you need a job. It's something that we do to communicate, to have a relationship, and that's why I'm doing it with my son. And that's why we do it with God. If it's important enough for me to want to have that kind of relationship with my son, how much more God with us? And sometimes it does take us coming to him and just saying, God, here I am, because he's never going to bully himself into conversation with you.
Yeah.
He's just always there waiting.
Sometimes he does. Sometimes he does. Paul got kind of bullied, if you will, into having a conversation with Jesus, but it's very rare.
Yeah.
So don't wait for it.
You're right.
God
the exception,
has,
not the norm.
God has an opinion about your life, about what you need to do to change. Yeah. God actually has a very good opinion.
Yeah, he's right on.
Yeah.
With what needs to change.
Very seldom have I encountered a time when his opinion was wrong, and then every time when I thought his opinion was wrong, I gave it a little bit of time, and it turned out he was right.
Imagine that.
Well, thanks for joining us today. And like we said, results are typical here. You heard it here first. And so we do have all of the answers.
We do.
So come back each week for the Transformation and Truth podcast.
And listen, we're not preying on you, but we'd love to be your prey. So if you want to just dig into us, but anything that we've shared, we'd love to hear it. Anything. We'd love feedback.
Communicate with us via Twitter, Facebook, email. I'm sure if you're watching this in 10 years, communicate with us by China Google Talk or something. I'm assuming that's
Right.
what's going to take over the planet.
Yeah.
Some conglomeration of Google in China.
I don't want to spend too much time talking about the zombie apocalypse, but have we not considered yet that might be the language we speak in the future? Like zombie language? Like, how do we know zombies are really going to be coming to eat brains? Maybe they're just coming for jobs.
That could be very true.
You know?
That could be very true. They're coming to a land of opportunity.
To a land of opportunity. They're zombies will come, and then they'll just immigrate here, and then they'll be our CEOs. They might even have a zombie president.
How do we know that we aren't already there?
Ooh, that's true. Roddy Piper was in a movie, and he exposed the politicians to be zombies.
There we go. You heard it here first.
That could have. If you can hear me, Roddy Piper, you were onto something. You might be the next Einstein.
You heard it here first. Our nation is controlled by zombies. Talk to you next week.
All right.